theyeshiva.net.
238, Kufya Test, column 3. So the Balatanya said in this Maamer Vayikach Haman that when somebody begins Avodas Hashem, the whole process of Avodas Hashem, Avodah Shebelev Zu Tefillah, but the whole experience of Avodas Hashem, it can't happen without what he calls Midas Hagasus. Midas Hagasus means not arrogance in the regular conventional term of arrogance or haughtiness or self-centeredness, but in the sense that a person has to be able to see himself as valuable, see himself as significant. As he puts it, Oises Atzmai L'Bchinas Yesh V'Davar Ma. And thus, the person says to himself, I want to live my life to the fullest. I want to achieve my ultimate potential. I want to touch truth. However you want to define the exact equation in this person's life. But the point is, I want to live a good life. I want to live a true life. The lack of Avodas Hashem will bother him because he doesn't want to be separated. So even though, he says, even in the most authentic fashion, a person wants to be close to Hashem, there is something that he calls gasus. Why? The person sees himself as something valuable, as something significant, and believes in the power of his avodah. His avodah could make him closer. Not only the avodah could make him closer, his avodah is a nachas ruach, l'mayla for Hashem. It means something to Hashem himself. And the opposite as well. The lack of his avodah means something. This all comes from underscoring a certain profound value and significance in the self. Now let's continue. He continues. The line starts, Ubehepach, Ubehepach. Shebecholza, in this entire process that we're talking about, even though here it's very brief and concise exactly what the person is thinking, what the person is considering, what Avodas Hashem means to him, but in this entire process, any way you cut it, Hare yesh mi shetoveya mimenu. The person understands that there's somebody demanding something from him. You're on a calling. There is something valuable. Somebody wants something from you. Yesh mi shetoveya mimenu. And you're the one being summoned, so to speak. Like in a debt, you have a toiveya and you have a nitba. The toiveya is the plaintiff, the one who demands. The nitba is the one who we're demanding from, right? The defendant. Somebody will come to you and say, pay me back my debt. The last thing this person is going to say to him is, well, he may be tempted to is, I'm valueless, I'm insignificant, my money is insignificant, how can I be bothering you so much? That if I don't pay you this debt, you're upset. And of course everybody understands the foolishness. That's what a teveya and a nitva means. There's something I need from you. You took something from me and I want it back. In real Avodas Hashem, there's a calling. There's a chshivas here. There's a metzias. There's a teveya. There's a nitva. V'areyesh tainu tviya. Taina means there's a complaint. There's a tviya. There's a demand. This all means that the nitva, the person, is a metzias, and not just a metzias, a significant one. V'yachal lifter es atzmei. That's why there's the ability for a person. Like when it comes to a debt, the person can give all types of excuses. A person could say, I paid. A person could say, I'll pay tomorrow. A person could say, I don't owe you anything. Whether it's a true or a false is not relevant here. The point is There's a calculation here, there's a calculation there, and then I decide, no, I want to pay, I should pay. V'yachal lifter esat, he can exempt himself. Chuli. Here too, there's two sides. That's his point, there's two sides. Now, real avodas Hashem means that there's an option also not to serve God. And I'm making a decision. Why am I making a decision? I'm making a decision based on what type of person I want to be, based on what type of life I want to be. There's an option not, and I choose yeah.
So lifter tasma means to be a porikol. You can
Yeah,
choose to be
yeah. And we'll soon see the contrast, why that's important. This Yachal lifter is why it's important. But what if a person feels that he or she is completely insignificant, completely valueless? I have no value. My life has no value. I have no identity. So then they can't even begin the process of avodas Hashem in a genuine way. I may be able to force somebody to do something. That's true. But that's not called avodas Hashem. That's just called a coerced robot. Avodas Hashem that's real. There's a relationship. There's a connection. There's somebody involved in the relationship here. It's not just a lifeless robot. For this, the person has to have some form of self-awareness, some form of awareness, maybe some form of awareness of the self, its value. That's what he calls here, midas hagasus. That's why something bothers me. This feels good, this doesn't feel good, this is right, this is wrong, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. I want to actualize my life. I want to be close to truth. I want to have kirvas elikim. I don't want to be nifrid. I don't want to be separated and detached, and so forth. V'kol all this is mipnei tzad harichuk shel adam me'Hashem. All this, as good as it sounds, comes because there is an element of distance between a person and Hashem, that the person experiences himself as a nifrid, meaning as an independent, autonomous human being. Nifrid means autonomous, from the word pirud, separate. Independent. That's the experience of a person. I feel myself on whatever level as something significant, autonomous, and now I have to make a decision how I want to live. And therefore, he sees himself as a yesh. Yesh means something that exists. Davar means, again, a thing. In his avoid, in his approach to avoida. Back to the mashal of the Balchayv. It's like I'm paying what I'm obligated. In other words, there's you, there's me. You're coming to me and you're saying, I gave you a lot of money, there's something I really need from you. And I'm like, you're right. And now let me give you what I owe you. The person feels, I owe something to my life. There's a question I have to answer. I have to answer the question, what I want to do with myself. Why was I born? So then my answer is, I want to be in a relationship with God. Poireya Mashachayev. Avol be'emes. That could be one cheshbon. He's not focusing now exactly if it's hakaras hatov or something else.
How you touch bittul? There is such a thing as bittul. No, even the guy who owes money, I understand he has to be cash, but how does it become bittul after that?
So in this case, what bittul means is that I'm choosing to be in a relationship with you. That's what bittul means here. Bittul means I'm choosing to be in a relationship with you. I'm choosing to be connected to you. I'm choosing of being dedicated to you. We spoke of the mashal of a marriage, right? If a husband proposes and he says, a potential husband proposes, but he says, but remember that I don't really exist and I have absolutely no value and there's nothing in me and I'm just unbelievable shmata though. If you need to step on something, I'll be there always. And remember, I have no feelings, no experiences, no emotions. Right? The best marriage in the world, no expectations and so forth. Something is wrong. What's wrong is there's nobody here. There's nobody here. There's literally nobody here. So the same as that's what he says in Avodas Hashem, right? On the other hand, I am here. I do have a lot of emotions. I have an identity, and I want to do it together with you.
So maybe
I want to live together with you.
I could say to you that the whole point is, yes, we are supposed to be Mevatzel and realign all the way back to the source. But in doing so, not 100%, 99 point whatever minus 164%. A little bit of Yeshus we preserve, even this bittul, to not...
He's talking now, the beginning of Avodas Hashem begins with a process of a person appreciating that they exist and their existence has value. First of all, I exist. It's not that I don't exist. If I don't exist, then, okay, I don't exist. Fine, so it's over. I think I exist, okay, so go to therapy for your thoughts. But that's number one. I exist, and my existence has real value. And that's why the question is what to do with this existence. It has real value. I want to, and therefore, because it has so much value, I want it should be exercised and lived in the most powerful way. That's step one.
So bittul don't touch, it is not touching, no value.
No, never. The word bittul as meaning that you're valueless doesn't exist. That's a distorted interpretation of bittul. That's what I gave the introduction yesterday, right before the Shir, as we were starting the Inyan about this tension. The definition of bittul or Kabbalah Sal Malcha Shemayim or Yiras Shemayim or Messiah, whatever, all the beautiful words as meaning that a person has no value is distorted. It has no place in reality. I know that people think that way, but it's not.
What would be the right word?
Well, we'll soon see the next state of what real bittul means. Okay? I usually translate bittul as alignment. Alignment, which means you align yourself with who you really are. Even in halacha, we once spoke about this in a Maamer and Shlach about the sneh, tchelis. Even in halacha, when we speak about bittul b'shishim and all those things, there's a famous shit in Rishonim, the Rosh, that bittul doesn't mean that the taste gets nullified. Right? It means that it actually gets transformed. It becomes like the majority. For example, let's say there's an apple that's not kosher. It's an apple of Arla from the first 3 years, and it gets mixed in to 500 apples. You have a box of apples, so if there's not many apples, it doesn't. But there's a lot of apples. So Arla's Bechad the Messiah. So it gets mixed in, say, 300 apples, 400 apples. So it's mutter, you're allowed to eat it. There's a treif apples, an unkosher apple. This is called bittul. That's what bittul is. The question is, do you have to take out one apple and not eat it or not? So there's many shittas that the definition of bittul is, the lashon is ha'isur nepach liyas k'maya heter. That bittul means that which is bottle becomes transformed. It's not bottle, it gets, like, you're not noticed anymore. You're overwhelmed, so you're not noticed. Rather, it becomes transformed. So even in halach, it's interesting how to define bittul. I'll call upon it. So all of this underscores that there's a certain sense of I. And that I is necessary. Because if you get rid of that I, then my avodah means nothing. And I'm not moved. I'm not moved to anything. There's an I, and the I has choices. And the I chooses to be in a relationship. And that's the power of the relationship. That's the value of the relationship. Aval be'emes, now comes a higher state of consciousness, which he says you can't begin with. This be'emes, he's saying it's be'emes, but it's not for the maschil, it's not for the beginner. You can't begin with this, you'll soon see why. Aval be'emes, the truth is, im haya davak b'Hashem betachlis hadveikus hamitis. Now it's interesting. When the Balatanya will talk about this, he's now going to fly away with the second state. But he said clearly you can't start with this. So he's now going to describe a completely different state of Avodas Hashem now. He's going to change course completely. But as he said before, the maschil, the one who starts, cannot start with this. But what's this now? The emes, but the truth is, if a person was experiencing. The ultimate dveikus. Dveikus means connection, oneness, intimacy, dveikus, complete oneness. The ultimate dveikus, which is true. Harei ein tzarich l'tainos v'taimim klal. Then he doesn't need tainus, and he doesn't need taimim. Tainus would mean, so to speak, explanations to himself. A tainus, like a complaint, or a tam, a reason. He doesn't need it. Why? Ki ein bazeh tam. Over here, avodas Hashem doesn't have a tam in terms of a reason. Why? Because he's one with the essence of Hashem, with godliness. The ein lefon of b'chinas nifrid la'atzmai klal. Ki einoid malvado iksiv. That lefonav, in his presence, there's nothing separate. As the pasuk says, Adar in Dvarim, Moshe Rabbeinu says twice, Adar saladas ki Hashem hu elikim ein oid malvada. Says ein oid malvada iksiv. The pasuk says ein oid malvada, which means there's nothing outside of him. So if a person can experience the truth of this pasuk, if a person experiences the truth of ein oid malvada, so now there's no need for reasons, for explanations, what he calls tainus, v'taimim. What's the benefit?
I am worth it. I'm not worth it.
There's the chatchila oneness. There's oneness. If there's real dveikus, v'lo yesh mi shechayev shetzarich lefroya. It's not that there's somebody, back to the mashal of the debt, there's somebody who's chayev, he owes me a debt, so now he has to pay. In other words, there's two separate people, and you have my money, and I need something from you, and you want to give it to me. V'lo shayich inyin tam utviyah, not talis utfilin. V'lo shayich inyin taina utviyah klal. The whole concept of back and forth, a taina, but there's a tviyah, what's right, what's wrong. It's not shayich. Elarak echad poshut bulvat. There's complete oneness. Ve'ein davar is a lasei klal, and there's nothing outside of him. If there's nothing outside of him, so then it's not a psahava mina. Yeah, avoida, not avoida. If it's separate, again, back to the mashal in the marriage, right? There's two separate people. Each is on their own journey. I have an option, this way or this way. I calculate my life, and I say, you know what? This is going to be the greatest life possible, to be in a relationship with this person. Why do I calculate that? Because I know my value, because I want to live a good life. If I don't exist, then I have no value and nothing. On the contrary, it's coming because I underscore my significance, and therefore I want to suck the marrow out of life, so I want to be in a relationship with you. And that's why there's options. We're two separate people, and we have to choose. The Gemara says, "Asur l'kadosh ein mekachnas ish ela midaita." There has to be consent, because that's what it's based on. It's based on an active, involved relationship. That's not coerced. If it's coerced, it's not a relationship. It's basically I'm beaten down and I'm just a lifeless robot. You do with me whatever you want. So you want to be a tyrant and a dictator, fine. But that's why there's options. That's what options means. Because I have to choose this. When one can experience, but that's all because the Rebbeinu Shalom allowed for a sense of pirud. That's how creation happened. Like we looked in the previous Maamer V'yadaita, that's what Tzimtzum is. Tzimtzum is that Einoid Mulvadoi is not the initial instinctive experience of life. The instinctive experience of life is, I exist. But he says the emes is Einoid Mulvadoi Ksiv. It's a pasuk. What's the man? Einoid Mulvadoi. Pasuk Einoid Mulvadoi. Einoid Mulvadoi means we're one. We're completely one. There's no separateness. If there's no separateness, this is who I am. There's an expression of the Baal Shem Tov. God is Alts, and Alts is God. Yeah, Hashem is everything, and everything is Hashem. If that's the case, so it's not, I want to connect, I don't want to connect, there's an option. Echad Poshet. When one experiences that state of consciousness. And of course, when one is in that state of consciousness, they're not experiencing it anymore. They're in that oneness. And that it's in every one of these b'chinas, there's of course endless madregas and levels. Just like in the first one, there's a madrega, deeper, deeper, deeper. But that's the general concept. So there's no choice. In addition, First of all, it's not like there's a taina, there's a tviyah this way or that way, because it's the chatchila one. In addition to that, there's no sense of I am serving, because there's only oneness. So first of all, the option ceases, and second of all, the sense of I involved in this relationship ceases, because the I is not experiencing itself as separate. To give some illustration of this in a more simple way, even if it's not a complete metaphor, it would be like the relationship of the limbs of the body and the organs of the body to the brain. For example, I'm speaking now. As you couldn't see, my hands are moving. That takes effort. It takes effort. What's the process of these hands moving? Or some of you are swaying, some of you are shaking your heads, some of you are moving your feet. You're not under examination, it's fine. What's the process? Is the process, my brain turned to my hand and said, Tayere Hentele, you're middle of giving a shir. It's deep stuff. The oil of it nish verstehen. Do me a favor. Pick up the hand. Machazoi, so everybody will see that you're saying something. Because if you just sit like this, they don't know if you're sleeping or you're awake. Make chazoi, so everybody knows you're saying something. They should listen. And my hand says, excuse me, don't tell me what to do. It's early in the morning. I want to relax on the table. It's enough I have to get out of bed for you. Now you're going to start telling me what to do? Go like this and go like this. I'm not. And what I say in Hebrew, Ani love fryer, yeah? Ani love fryer. I'm not going to be manipulated. And there's no kfiyat datit here. We don't believe in religious coercion. We live in America. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. And the brain starts either threatening, okay, if you don't listen, I'll teach you, or not even threatening, in an aspiring way. Let me explain to you the value of it. And then the hand, after a half an hour lecture, the hand says, okay, I'll do what you want. If this is happening, then you have to go to the emergency room immediately. If this is happening. This means the person is nebach very ill. I mean physically ill. What's the definition of a healthy body? The hand experiences itself as one with the brain. It's not there's two separate entities going on, and the brain gives a commandment, and then the hand has to debate it, and then they go to a din Torah, and they go to a court case, and then it goes searching for itself, and after 5 years it says, okay, I'm doing tshuva. There's one central nervous system. There's one holistic, integrated organism. And if the hand doesn't feel that way, that means there's an illness. That means that this organism is not functioning well. That means that something serious is going on. It's not a healthy situation. B'steifus. So in the real dveikus, when a person, this is what real bittul is. This is what real bittul is. Yes, it's self-nullification, but what type of self-nullification that is? That the self discovers itself as an expression of infinity, as an expression of Ein Sof. There's no I and you. But you can't begin this way. You can't begin this way. If you tell a child, and I don't mean only a child in years, I mean also a child in terms of development, which is sometimes a bigger child. If you tell a child, you don't exist, what is he supposed to do with this? People tell this to children in one way or another, and the impacts are very noticeable. You have to be able to reach this, to appreciate it, to understand what it means, because if not, it could sound like you just wanted to destroy me. It's an act of destruction. It's not an act of rehabilitation.
It sounds like you know come.
So to speak, I'm giving that mashal of the body. It's really even deeper than that. But I think it's a pretty good mashal. To describe, it's not the hand says, oh, excuse me, who are you? Do I owe you? Don't I owe you? What's the cheshbon? It will be better for me. A healthy arm doesn't make that cheshbon. Why? You are the brain. The brain is you. The brain is not your competitor. The brain is not your king giving you commandments. It's all one thing. That's what an organism is. It's one guf. It's just manifested in different limbs and organs. It's all one organism. It's one mitzvah is the whole guf. And today, the more we know medicine, the more we see it. The intricacies, even though it looks like different parts, it's not, physically it's different parts, but it's all mamish one. And it's guided by a holistic manual, DNA, etc. There's a complete achdus. It's not separate things that I'm commanding you and you're responding and you have a choice. First of all, there's no option. This is it. You are one. There's no option. You don't have to make choices. Not because you're being dictated, because this is your MS. It's not like we crush the hand. I don't care for my hand. I'm abusing my hand. If I cared. Imagine that the chest, the heart, summons the arms and the legs and the abdomen and the kidneys and the pancreas and the liver and all limbs of the body and says, this little brain, a chutzpah, a little Napoleon, this brain, a few inches, mamish jello, with one punch, and he runs the whole show. Genug. Free at last. We're not going to allow this little brain and little manipulator in my skull on top. He runs the whole show, tells everybody what to do. Nobody do anything without him. How long will we live under this tyranny, under this oppression? What do? They gang up and they're strong chevra. The strong chevra somewhere under the brain, a lot of strong guys. They gang up, they drill a hole in the skull, they take out the brain, and they throw him into the dustbin. The problem is, before they can cry, free at last, it's more like Yisgadal. The Yisgadal, the Chevra Kaddish has to be called. Why? What did they destroy? They didn't destroy the brain, they destroyed themselves. They don't exist anymore. They're just a piece of dead flesh. With the brain, it's all one body. So it's not a competition, everybody laughs, because we all understand this instinctively. Thank God we're healthy people. That's what a healthy organism is. So it's not that there's an option and then I have to choose. It's not that there's even a separate I to choose. First of all, there's no choice and there's no body to choose. Say the cheftze of avodas Hashem is not shaykh, and say the gavra is not shaykh. The cheftze in terms of I'm choosing this versus this is who I am. And the gavra, there's no I to choose. I am you, you am I. There's one. Einoid milvadai. But this is real dveikus. Real dveikus means when the truth of Ein Sof gets nisgala, gets revealed, there's no period whatsoever. So then there's complete oneness. My losing myself in God is not a chisaron. It's the ultimate realization of self, because the true self is divinity, is infinity. I think I told you once, it was just a very rich metaphor that I heard from somebody. I once asked a great pianist, a renowned one. He played in Carnegie Hall and other such places. And I asked him an interesting question. I was curious because of my own work. I asked him, when you're sitting there at the piano, thousands of people, it's a top performance, classical music, what's the definition of success? I mean, you know the songs, you know how to play, you've done this for years, yeah. But what's the definition? Sometimes you have an evening and you say, it was good. Sometimes, between 1 and 10, it was schwach. Maybe a lot of the crowd won't know, but you know. What's the definition of you were on or you weren't on? So he said to me, the ultimate success of an evening is, I know it when I'm not present during the performance. When I am not present during the performance. So I understood what he meant, but I wanted to understand more in Oisius. I said, what do you mean? So he said, if I'm in the middle of playing and I'm completely not conscious of me playing, I'm completely not conscious, as though I'm not present there. He says, that's when the magic happens. Basically, my fingers become a conduit. My whole self and my fingers become a conduit for the music. There's no I involved. That's always when I hit the mark, because there's no I. Sometimes, and any artist knows this, anybody who performs, speaking, writing, dance, and anything, sports, and any such type of involvement in the world. I know I speak a lot, as some of you know. Right? Sometimes I speak and I'm very self-conscious. I'm here, I'm speaking to the crowd. I want to communicate effectively. I want them to invite me again. All that, it seems like very normal, very human. But it compromises the quality of the experience. Because there's like two separate things. There's the words, there's the people, there's me, and that always gets in the way of the energy. When there's a moment when you cease to be, what does it mean you cease to be? Your self-consciousness is now out of the way. It's not you become less, you become much more. You become part of infinity. The music is going through you. And when the music goes through you, it's a whole different experience. Typhus. That's what real bittul is. That's what real bittul is. The self becomes part of infinity, so there's no self. That's what he says. Ein nifrid. There's no self. There's echad pasha. They need malvadik. Doesn't make the person less powerful. Makes the person much more powerful, but not as powerful as separate, as egotistical. On the contrary, it's the most humbling experience because you're not there actually.
It's like dance like no one is watching.
Huh?
Dance like no one
is watching you.
You would call a hand bittul to the moyer?
Huh? So the hand and the brain is a good dogma for this. Yeah, it's one. It's one. And that's what makes a hand so powerful. Chas v'shalom, amputate a hand. What happens to it? A toitishtik flesh. It's a dead piece of flesh. Now what is it? It's part of the miracle of human life. It can write, it can accomplish great things. It's a whole different mitzias. It's elevated from a piece of flesh that is lifeless to a living organism.
So the orla apple becomes kosher.
Right. Yeah. That's according to the Rishonim, what bittul is, that the arla, or the milk, or whatever it is actually transformed into kosher. It becomes part of the higher substance that it's nullified in. So even in halacha, according to many, nullification doesn't mean nullification. It means you become aligned, you become part of something greater. There's a moededik word from the Maggid of Mizrich, the Rebbe of the Balatanya. It says in Tanakh, they describe the Nevi'im, Vayihi kenagen hamenagen vatihi alav ruach Hashem. Vayihi kenagen hamenagen vatihi alav ruach Hashem. Which means the Nevi'im and the Bnei Nevi'im, they would play music as a form of spiritual ecstasy and oneness and meditation. So what's Vayihi kenagen hamenagen? So it's like when the menagin started to sing. So he teaches, Vayihi kenagen hamenagin vatihi alav ruach Hashem, when the menagin became a nagin. Which means, when the menagin, the singer, kenagen hamenagin, when he became a cheftza of music, when he became like the violin, when he became an instrument for the music, vatihi alav ruach Hashem. Sometimes when you look at a violin, what's the power of a violin? There's a machlokes in Gemara Maseches Erkin. There used to be every day a concert in the Beis HaMikdash. Every morning, every single day there was a symphony. It was beautiful. And you can have, people don't realize what was going on in the Beis HaMikdash. You can have usually 120 people on the symphony. Vocalists and musicians. And this is what the Levium were in charge of. You had vocalists, those who sang, and you had the musicians, those who played instruments. 120 people. That's a serious symphony every day. It wasn't just once a month you went out for a symphony. This was the Beis HaMikdash every single day. Bring that into a regular shul or yeshiva today. Besides here everything goes. But bring it into a regular shul. They'll say, what's this? This is a new Judaism? But this was the Beis HaMikdash every day for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash. So the machlokes in Masechta Erkin, what's the most important thing? The vocalists or the musicians? Which is the more important? Which is lechatchila? Which is b'diyah? Now, which do you mamish need? And which is extracurricular? Is it the singers, the vocalists, or the musicians? Interesting machlokes, because the Torah doesn't say clearly. There's the shira. We learned out that there has to be shira. But what's shira? Is shira b'peh or shira b'kli? Now, what would you baskin? What's more important? At a concerto, lahavdil, what's more important? The vocalist, who has a beautiful, beautiful voice and sings and so forth, or the instruments?
Without the instruments,
without the instruments, it's verhakt a bisschen.
Yeah? It's all the same.
Huh?
It's all the same.
Okay, but fart. Yeah, but la halacha. Go tell this to Briska. La halacha, what do you need? You need this, you need that. You're talking from the perspective of the music.
From physics point of view.
I understand. You're a physicist. I
Or are
understand.
you playing music? The same notes you're getting out.
So the Gemara has a machlokes. La halacha, according a halacha, the Rambam paskins la halacha that the ikar shir is bekeli, the instruments. And those are those who argue. Come on, what's the instrument? The instrument is just an accompaniment to the song. Yeah. What's the havana? The havana. So in Chassidus it says the havana because when a person sings, there's ultimately the bittul can't be as complete as a keli. A violin has no ego. What does we speak to a violin? You're in the mood. You're in the mood. If a violin is not in the mood, that means it's broken. It's not a violin anymore. Sometimes a violin is not in the mood, right? It's like when your car is not in the mood. You get into the car and you say, we got to go to the city. The car says, excuse me, wer bist du? Did you consult me? Yeah. If your car is doing that, it's time for a new car. What's the definition of a good car? We're going to Manhattan. The car says, here we go. Now we're going right. Here we go. The car starts saying, well, wer bist du? Let's think about this. I also have a life. GPS. Why?
GPS changing the moods all the time.
Because that's a person. That's a person. That's a mushal for Merkava. And that's already detached from the body. It's not the body anymore. But again, why? Because it's a doimim. Because it's lifeless. We all understand. Because it's a gegarze biyad ha'chaytzef. When I pick up my axe also doesn't revolt against me because it's an axe. It doesn't have that bchira. The chiddush in the body is that it's alive, but you still see that achdos. So the instrument, the violin, it doesn't have its own identity, its entire identity. What does Rabbi Yehuda Halevi say in the Tisha B'Av? There's a famous poem where he speaks about Haloi Tzion. It starts off, Tzion haloi sish'ali l'shloim asirayich. Yeah? Tzion, haloi sish'ali. So what does he say there? Ani kinor l'shirayich. I am a harp for your melodies. Later, those words were paraphrased and used for the song Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. But it comes from Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. People don't know. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's poem, what we say on Tisha B'Av, Ani kinor l'shirayich. I am a harp for your melody. I am a harp. That's who I am. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi saw himself as a kinor, as a harp through which the music of Yerushalayim is vibrating through. Zog the Magid vayihi ken nagen hamen nagen. When the menagen becomes a nagen, vatiyal of Ruach Hashem. That's when the spirit of the divine can dwell on you. When you cease to be self-conscious and you become the music. When you look at the violin, you see the music. The violin becomes the music. The harp becomes the music. The piano becomes the music. Because the keli has no identity outside of the music. When the menagin can become that type of nagin, vatiyal of Ruach Hashem. The Ein Sof, the infinity, can dwell through him. And I'll tell you just an interesting footnote in history. This Torah doesn't come from the sources of Chassidus, even though it should. It comes from a very strange place. There was a man, a Jewish man. He was a Polish Jew or Ukrainian Jew. His name was Shlomo Maamer. Shlomo Maamer in his times, until today, was known as one of the great apikurim of the generation. One of the great heretics of the generation. He grew up in a Jewish home, obviously, but he went searching. And he became a friend of Moses Mendelssohn, Moshe Mendelssohn, in Berlin. And he became a very famous German philosopher. He also suffered from terrible depression and alcoholism. But he was a brilliant man. He wrote commentary, he wrote a svarim on the Rambam, and a very interesting person, but completely antagonistic to Yiddishkeit, and especially to the new world of Chassidim. And he went to visit the Mezritcher Magid for a Shabbos, with very, very negative attitude, which he writes. He has an autobiography, and he writes it. And he was actually very taken by the Shabbos, and because he was so emotionally antagonistic, you could trust everything he says because there was no agenda. There was no like Hasidic bias to try to make things. On the contrary, his criticism is open. And in his autobiography, he brings this Torah from the Magid. He brings this Torah, and it blew him away. He was so impressed with the sophistication of it because he thought it was just a bunch of archaic, old-fashioned, ancient people who do strange things and have there's no teichen, there's no depth. That's where I saw the Torah. The Teichen passed for the Magid. It's that type of energy. But that's where the source comes from. It's damn interesting.
Source of what exactly?
This Torah, he kenagin hamenagin v'tilav ruach Hashem. What's kenagin hamenagin? When the menagin becomes a nagin.
Is he a descendant of the Rambam?
They like the Rambam because Moreh Nevuchim is a very rational, philosophical work. The Yad HaChazaka they didn't like so much. Over there, the Rambam is...
That explains the notion of having to form the kli in order to not to that properly. You need to that's a bit lower for the
That's the svara that's the svara of the shitta. It's a machlokes in Gemara, but the svara that the main shira is bekelim is because there's something about the keli, and we see it. People sometimes sing beautifully. I mean, not everybody, but some people open their mouths and they sing, and it's geschmack, right? But there's a magic about an instrument that we all know there's something unique. That's why when singers are accompanied, there's a musical instruments. I mean, somebody sits at a piano and plays piano. Those, again, I know there's those who sit down at the piano and,
Find another place to
huh? They say that there was once a school was doing a performance, so they had the kids doing the violin. So there was one guy sitting there and he was crying. So people were very impressed how emotional he was. They said, "Is this your child, your grandchild?" He says, No. So he says, "So why are you crying?" He says, "Because I know how to play the violin." So sometimes you hear somebody play. When somebody's playing the instrument properly, there's just like this magic that goes beyond the human voice. Something very, very special, very powerful. What is it? It's a doimim. It's almost like what you took a few strings and then the machst azay and you're knocking a few keys. But hagufa, because it's a doimim, it has no consciousness, so it becomes, so to speak, one with the music. So it can trigger that component within the person himself. That type of complete bittul, that complete oneness. And he says, "Uke'inyan shematzinu ba'Avraham." This consciousness we see by Avraham. Shahaya levavei neman lefnei Hashem k'may shekasuv u'matzasa es levavei neman lefanecha. Every morning in Shachris we speak about Avraham, and we say, "Atu Hashem Elokim asher bacharta b'Avraham tzeisem merakaz d'mesamta shmoi Avraham." Every morning, you remember? U'matzasa es levavei ne'eman lefanecha v'charis imoy habris, etc. You have found his heart, ne'eman lefanecha. He says, what does this mean, ne'eman? We translate ne'eman as loyal, getrai, faithful, trustful, like ne'eman from the word emuna, trust, levavi ne'eman. He says, levavi ne'eman lefanecha. Pirush levav ne'eman. What's levav ne'eman? She'enoi b'chlal b'chinas nifrit klal. That there was no period. His life was neman. There was complete loyalty. There was no separateness. Leois bebeis levavos yetzer tov v'yetzer hara. He wasn't fragmented by two separate hearts. The yetzer tov, the positive inclination, the yetzer hara, another inclination. So we're struggling with two hearts and have to make choices. Do I pay back the debt? I don't pay back the debt. From a Torah perspective, I'm born, and there's a purpose that I'm demanded for something. I'm called on for something. That's what's called priyas chayv. Paying a debt means you owe me something. God says, I sent you to the world. You owe the world something. The world is waiting for your money. The world is waiting for your input. But there's a struggle. There's choices. There's an option azay. There's an option azay. And who's behind all those? I. The Gavra, the Chefksa. He says here, there's no leiv echad v'ratzon echad pashat v'lo shayich inyan tainu utvia ki yeinaid malvadoi. That was Avram. That's why it says matzasa es levavoi. It should have said matzasa es liboi, his heart. Why levavoi with two vases? Baltani says that's the whole chiddush. Matzasa es levavoi. The heart has two ventricles, the right ventricle, the left ventricle. Spiritually, the Yetzer Tov, the Yetzer Hara. Our hearts are fragmented because there's no oneness. Umatzoses levavoy, both levavs, two bases, both became neman lefanecha. Why? And here he goes, v'zehu lefanecha. And that's why the pasuk adds the word lefanecha. That was the key. Umatzoses levavoy neman, you know why? Lefanecha, because he was in front of you. Because when you're in the presence, when you're lefanecha, then there's no period, there's no separateness. The whole experience of separateness is because we're not lefanecha. We are products of post-tzimtzum. It's not lefanecha. It's not in your face. When I'm in your lefanecha, when you're in the presence of truth, there's no separateness anymore. It's not a struggle anymore. The I and God's I are one. They melt into one. There's oneness. Kenagein hamenagein. Then Vatiyalav Ruach Hashem, there's no separateness. Umatzasas levavei neman, he's not just saying a fact, he's explaining, because it was lefanecha, because it was in front of you, in your presence. B'meila, what happens now? V'chashe levavei neman b'loi tamim. And when you have this levavei neman without reasons, azai, v'chorus in my abris, losses lazare aknani, achiti, zayin midus royus, kiptela memeila. So what's the next step? V'charis, remember, he made a covenant with him to give him Knani, Chiti, Amori, Prizi, Yevusi, V'Gegoshi, 7 lands. How are you supposed to read this part of davening? The 7 lands, the 7 Canaanite nations represent the 7 midos. Knani, Chiti, Amori, Prizi, Yevusi, Chivi, Girgoshi, each one represents one of the 7 midos. Why is it so important that you're going to conquer the land of 7 nations? How does this apply? Because each one of those nations represented a certain midah, a certain quality in the human soul that was embodied by this tribe, by this nation, which needs sublimation, it needs healing. Somebody's love can be powerful and functional, and somebody's love can be dysfunctional. Somebody's sense of awe, of discipline, can be crazy and sick and cruel, and it can be healthy and wholesome. Because Matzasas Lavavai, so the Jews conquering the 7 nations represents conquering and healing, transforming the 7 midos. Because Matzasas Lavavai Neman Lefanecha, automatically V'charis in my abris losses eretz haknani the kulab telim. Why? Keep telim memela. Keep telim memela. Because if there's complete achdus, if there's complete oneness, so then all the midos are played out as reflections of divine harmony, divine oneness. So because Matzasas Levavim Lefanach, automatically V'charis by Abris, he made a covenant with them to be able to receive those, because the way the person's personality is experienced is a different type of personality. Not that he doesn't have midos, but that his midos are a reflection of divine infinity. This is the second state. This is what we call bittul. Verstehst what bittul is? This is the definition of bittul. There's bittul also in the first state. Don't underestimate it. The first state is very big. Now, he went to the second state, and the Balatanya was when he goes to the second state, you could see it resonated. But don't underestimate what he says about the beginning. Because if you go to step 2 without understanding step 1, you're not going to step 2. You're going to ground 0. You understand? You're not going to ground 2. You're going to ground 0. Step 1 is there's separateness. Yes, I exist and I'm separate. If it would be lefanecha, I wouldn't be separate, but I am separate. And we operate on both levels of consciousness. If we can even appreciate the second level of consciousness, maybe sometimes. But the beginning of Avodas Hashem begins with self-assertion in a positive way, in a good way. In a good way. And that's the haschal of Avodas Hashem. So whenever somebody feels that Yiddishkeit is about self-negation, self-obliteration, it's a complete misunderstanding of Judaism. And it's a tragedy, because it's the exact opposite. Even the real level of bittul, which is nullification, is completely not that. It's the opposite. Your 7 midos don't become nothing, they become divine, they become higher, not lower. Okay. My hands decided that they need a rest. Verstanden?
When you said about the story with the piano, it was very, very interesting. You said it started with asking what's his definition of success, happiness, and success.
Yeah.
So I think it gives me a new Havana in the Mishnah brothers of Canaanite and Dosa. How do you know if the tefillah has been successful? Im shgura b'fi. So what's he really saying with shgura b'fi? It's so
Shgura.
thinking.
Beautiful.
Thinking. It's just flowing.
Yes.
It's not even an awareness of me being in the tefillah. It's really what he's saying is I'm not present. The shgura b'fi, it just flows.
Yeah.
And the question to him is, how do you know if the tefillah is this couple? How do you know it's successful? So successful tefillah is that the sense
Shgura b'fi.
that he was simply not present, or
Yeah.
I think that's really the fun of Rav Kinib and also what
Yeah.
he was saying.
Yeah. Tosfos brings from a Yerushalmi. And one of the Amirayim said, Achzike tevusa l'nafshe, the kimota l'moidim and nafshe kara. I thank my body because when I come to moidim, it just bows on its own. So the Weltaiches, he was so used to it, it was like, it's second nature. You come to moidim. But the word is much deeper. Menafshe kara, it was menafshe kara. Just like when the body feels what the brain needs, is menafshe kara. If the brain is one with the divine, so menafshe kara, right? Same thing. When the Gemara says, "Kol mi she'einu kam b'moedim, kol mi she'einu kara b'moedim, einu kam l'tchis hames." So he brings this to Yerushalmi. So you're saying shgura b'fi is the concept of
That just flows. He's not thinking. Is that
Vanis is an expression in Tanakh. Vanit tefillah. So the Rebbe Rayat said, Vanis tefillah. Ich bin geworden a Stück tefillah. Vanis tefillah. We start Vanit tefillah. I'm davening. Like we say by Mincha Shabbos, Vanis tefillah silcha. It says Vanit tefillah. Ich bin geworden a Stück tefillah. I became a tefillah. I am the tefillah. That's what you're saying. Shgura b'fir b'chanina ben Dais.
I don't want to be chutzpah and say that.
Someone reaches his life, the same like you said, somebody, the hand does something different in the mind. He has to go to the doctor.
Yeah, that's how he feels it.
Reach that level and you do something right.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
When he hears about an Aveda, by him it's like
It's like your hand.
it's like never it's like an amputated hand. That's how he looks at it. In other words, it's something that's completely enigmatic. There's a lashon in Zohar. It says in Parshas Vayikach, "V'nefesh ki sechta," a soul that sins. So the Zohar says, "Tvaha." Tvaha is like Gemara bitmiya. Like don't read it with an exclamation. Read it with a question mark. V'nefesh ki sechta. V'nefesh ki sechta.
Two questions. So, when the psukim mentioned in passing, "Vaknani az ba'aretz," that's mean that midah is
Still Barrett's. Yeah.
is first coming.
Yeah.
First there was one, the second there was the third one.
Yeah.
That's when it's first manifesting itself. That we have to then come later and rectify it.
Yeah.
That's the Hezbollah on that.
Yeah.
Next question. So, if bittul is the
Oneness. Alignment.
So, is that the exact opposite of an addiction, where the person is so intertwined with the addicted substance? So, is that a similarity? Is there an opposite?
I don't see it as addiction. Addiction is the opposite. Addiction means when a person is an addict, they're also not making choices, but for the opposite reason, because the disease took them over, and it takes them further and further away from themselves. It's basically, in the sense, I give myself over to disease, but it's like a dead person. It's basically the disease took them over, and it destroys them.
You're giving yourself over to what?
It takes them away from their family, from their work, from their children, from their marriage, from health, from living a normal. It takes them away from anything that we value as humans.
So this becomes the bittul becomes the enhancement.
That's a different type of bittul. That's a bittul of literal bittul.
this definition of bittul is to enhance everything.
Of course.
Basically, for 40 years, I'm living that it starts with bittul, and you have to reach the ad. And now he's saying which is the opposite. You're ad, when you reach the true bittul, then you're awesome.
In mathematics and physics, there is a beautiful concept of bittul. It's called vector. Vector is a point and a direction. So if you're in the right direction, that's all. The point is you and the direction. So people are aligned, so basically they have the same vector. The vector is the same. So how powerful it is just the length of the vector, but it's the vector.
Yeah.
It's a little thing.
Yeah. So the Balatanya explained that the Rebbe taught us this Maamer Vayikach Haman, which der Chagav was said in the middle of the Suda of Purim. This Maamer was said in the middle of the Purim Suda. It says on there's different texts, there was different versions of different people who wrote this Maamer. This version was written by the Mittler Rebbe. There's another one that was written by his son. The Mittler Rebbe's brother, Reb Moshe, was a son of the Balatanya, his youngest son. It's printed in Maamer Admor Hazakin of the year Tovkov Samach Vav, 1806, which is the year when the Maamer was set, Purim Tovkov Samach Vav. They put a headline, Purim Besuda. It was the middle of the Suda of Purim. And that Suda, that Purim, I think there was another Maamer in the middle of the Suda, a previous one, and then a later one in the Suda. So it gives you a little description what the Purim Suda looked like. So the Nakuda that we learned in Siv Gimel was, after the whole Arichis with the Chita and the mites, the kernels and the husks, which he's still going to get back to, that there's two stages in Avodas Hashem. There's the beginners, what we call for beginners, and then there's advanced level. For beginners, where there's a sense of separateness, it's not lefanecha, a sense of separateness. And then Avodas Hashem means and denotes the fact that the person seeks and yearns to live the best, deepest, and truest life. And the opposite of that is painful for the person. There is an I, and the I wants, the I yearns, the I aspires. And the I has choices. And the I makes a cheshbon, makes a calculation. And the I chooses what we call Avodas Hashem. I want a relationship with Hashem. Because this is not lefanecha. So therefore, there's a sense of I. And he says that's how it has to begin. He says, Kol ha-maschilim b'avodas Hashem. This is Kol misha maschil. Everyone who begins the process, it's impossible if the person doesn't experience their innate value and significance in the eyes of themselves and in the eyes of God. And therefore, I want to do something with my life. Not only something, I want to do something special with my life. I want my life to be the best life. I want my life to be the truest life. I want my life to be a divine life. I also have to believe in my avodah. My avodah means something. The lack of my avodah means something. There's meaning in my existence. There's meaning in my decisions. There's meaning in my choices. My avodah accomplishes something. It brings me close. There's a nachas ruach. It's meaningful to Hashem kavayach. And he says, all of this is because there's a tzad harichuk. There is a distance, there's a sense of separateness. And in this world, in this realm, in this place, what does avodah mean? Avodah means that this I that experiences itself, and this I that experiences choices, I see the value and the significance of aligning it with the Ribbono Shel Olam, with the Master of the world. Then there is a deeper state of consciousness. But that's not the haskalah, that's not the beginning. The deeper state of consciousness is that I don't get distracted. I'm truly alive, so I don't get distracted by my eye. I don't get distracted by my eye because I come to the experience, as he puts it, Einoid Mulvadik Siv, with this complete, seamless oneness. The universe is holistic. What he calls Dveikus Amitis, true intimacy, complete oneness. The I here is not separate, and therefore there's no options. Yes and no, and this is what I owe to myself, and this is what I owe to you. Like the Baal Chayv, I owe you a debt, I'm going to pay you. You need it, I want it. There's lechatchila no separateness. He says, Acha shudavuku ba'atzmus alikus. The I doesn't comprise a chatzitza, a partition. I don't get distracted with me, and therefore I'm truly alive in even a deeper sense because my eye becomes part of the, so to speak, infinite symphony of the divine. Like it says by Avram Avinu, Matzasas levavai nemon, levavai, both sides of his heart were loyal, were one, because it was lefanecha, it was in front of you. And in front of you, when the you is present in a manifested way, there's nothing separate. There's nothing outside of it. As a result, what do we say in davening? The next words are and then we change themes. You remember this from davening? Every single morning there's people who have said this for 50, 60 years. It's a chiddush by us, no? A person could say something for 30, 40, 50 years, they didn't even once stop to think what they're saying. This is something unique among Orthodox Jews, and maybe among other people too, something unique.
This is not still 50 years, we're sure.
It's a prerequisite.
Eine Chaname. A meretach that the haskala is, you can have both. Doesn't have to be robotic. So at Parshas, it's just putting together a bunch of stuff. Now these are really verses from Nehemiah. From Nehemiah, Psukim from Nehemiah, we put into Vayvarech David, Psukkah de Zimra, and we say, after Atu Hashem Levadecha, Ata Sisas Hashemayim, B'chol Tzvam, V'ata Mechaya Eskulam, doesn't seem connected, but really it's one theme. Atu Hashem Levadecha, you're alone, you give life to everything. Atu Hashem Elikim, Hashem Hu Elikim. Asher Bachart, which is connected to Hashem Hu Elikim. Asher Bacharta Ba'Avram, you chose Avram. You took him out of Ur Kasdim. You changed his name to Avraham. Umatzosas Levavai Neman Lefanach. You found his heart loyal, faithful to you. And as the Balatanya said, Neman here doesn't just mean faithful, he was a loyal person. His Levavai was Neman. Both parts of the Belev, the two bases, not Liboy, but Levavai. The Yetzatev and the Yetzahara were completely one. Why? Because it was Lefanecha. There was no separateness. What's the result of that? The result of that is you made with him a covenant to give him the land of Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite, Perizi, Yevusi, Girgashi, the land of the 7 Canaanite nations. So we look at it as two things. Avram was your man, and you said, I'm going to reward you and give you Eretz Yisrael, where there lived 7 great tribes, or 7 cultures, 7 Canaanite empires. But there's also a spiritual meaning in it, and the physical meaning evolves from the spiritual meaning. That the 7 nations living in Eretz Yisrael, known as the 7 Canaanite nations, represent the 7 midos of the soul, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, Malchus. But in midos we have midos Toivas and midos Royas. There's the way that the midos are aligned with the divine, and the way the midos are fragmented and broken and become actually emotional experiences that take away a person from his or her true relationship with themselves and their core. So you'll have chesed, you'll have love that is productive, love that is that builds, love that is meaningful, love that is inspiring. And then one can also have love. They're attracted to things just because they're trying to numb their pain. This is the concept of addiction. I'm in love. I'm attracted to a lot of things. But my attractions are really a way of getting further away from myself. So you have to be careful which love you're into. The same is true gvura. Gvura is discipline, strength, boundaries. There are boundaries that build. There are boundaries that nurture. There are boundaries that come because of a wholesome self and a wholesome relationship with the other. And then there's gvura, which is basically I detach, again, because I can't be in a connection. It's too difficult, so I detach. Gvura, which becomes about impulsiveness or anger. And usually the two are very connected. When your ahava is off, your yira is off. When your chesed is off, your gvura becomes off. The same is true with everything else. Tiferes and Netzach and Hoyd and Yesod and Malchus. Each one of the 7 Canaanite nations represent one of these midas. Because Matzasas Lavavai Neman Lefanecha. So what's the result? V'charis in my habris, to give him these 7 nations, meaning that in Avram's life all the 7 midas can be liberated, they can be emancipated. From Canaan they could become Eretz Yisrael, they could become divine, they could be sublimated, because there's no separateness anymore. So that's what he says. V'chasha Lavavai Neman. The line is chuli, v'chasha levavei nemon beloy taimim, without reasons. This case, it's not you need a tam for avodas Hashem, a cheshbon and a tam, a reason. I'm looking for the flavor. Tam means reason, tam also means flavor. That's all when there's separateness. Here, the person doesn't need taimim. Az v'charis me'abris losas l'zare haknani achiti chuli zayin midisrois kiptele memela. It's automatically I give him these lands. In other words, they become batal memela. They become nullified from their route automatically. Mishum de kamei mamish kula kaloi chashiva b'mela ve'ein davar nifrit. There's an expression in Zohar, kula, which is very, very often quoted in the Svardim of the Balatanya, that kula kamei kaloi chashiv. It's actually based on a pasuk in Daniel. But it's quoted very frequently. In Torah Chassidus. What does kula kalmei kaloi chashiv mean? How do you translate it? Literally. And here you see he puts in 3 words, which gives a whole different translation. The literal translation is kula, everything. Kamei, in front of him, in his presence, is kaloi chashiv. It's like nothing. It's not significant. It's not chashiv. It has no value. It has no. Chashuv means significance, value, right? Adam chashuv. Kula kameik, everything in front of him, kaloi chashuv. It's like not considered. It's nothing. It's meaningless. Its value has no chshivas. Kula kameik. So many people, when they see these words, how do they explain it? Kula kameik, in his presence. In his presence, I'm nothing. I don't exist. I'm now the biggest shmata of the world. In other words, the more you become aware of God, the less you become chashav. That's what it says. Kula kamei kaloi chashav. If I'm not aware, if I'm not in front of him, then I can build myself up, at least in my imagination. But if it's kamei, then you realize, you pop the bubble, and you deflate the balloon, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Kama mensch. Kama, you're not even an ant. You don't even have the chshivas of an ant. Balatanya says you got it wrong. He puts in 3 words. Kula kamei kaloi chash, kamei mamish, in front of him. Kula kaloi chashiva, what's pshat ve'ein davar nifret. There's nothing separate. There's nothing outside of the Ein Sof. So not only are you chashiv, you're infinite. Ein davar nifret. Kula kamei, in his presence, you typhus. Kula kamei, in his presence, kaloi chashiv. You don't have an detached. You don't get distracted by an eye that is detached, because you're a conduit. Ein davar nifret. There's no pirut. Of course, there's no eye. The eye is one with Ein Od Milvadai, with Ein Sof. That's pshat kula kamei kaloi chashiv. If it's not kamei, there's tzimtzum, there's restrictions, there's concealments. So now I have to struggle with the me. And in that struggle, what's the derech of avodas Hashem? To appreciate the value of your life, to appreciate the value of the self, and to desire the best and the greatest life, which comes from a self-awareness and a certain self-consciousness, an appreciation of the self and its power and its potential and its greatness in the eyes of God. And without that, you can't begin Avodas Hashem. As I quoted from the Kotzker, what other people call prikas oil, I call atzvos. They call it removing the yoke of God, and I call it sadness, melancholy, depression, despair. I don't care. Do this, do that. I don't care. You know when somebody does, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. They don't care. They don't think they have the right to care. They don't think there's anything to care about. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. It's a form of giving up. It's a form of despair. It's a form of resignation. Avodas Hashem is the antithesis of resignation. The whole Shulchan Aruch is based on one thing. I wake up in the morning and God is waiting. There's a relationship. There's something exciting. He's interested in me. A Maisa was Rosh Hashanah once. A short Maisa. It's very powerful. Moving. The Maggid of Mezrich, his oldest Talmud, was a Jew known as Reb Mendele Vitebsker, or some people call him Reb Mendele Haradoker. He came from Vitebsk, he was in Haradok, and he's known as the Pri Haaretz. He wrote a sefer called Pri Haaretz. He was the oldest Talmud, one of the oldest Talmudim of the Maggid. The Balatanya was the youngest. In the intimate circle of Talmudim, they were called the Chevraya Kadisha, the Holy Chevra, the Holy Group. He was the oldest, Balatanya was the youngest. And he was a very great man. When the Maggid passed away, Yutas Kislev, Tovkuf Lamed Gimel, 1772. So for a few years, the Balatanya went to Reb Mendele as a chassid, as a Talmud. Reb Mendele Haradoker, Reb Mendele Vitebsker. Then, a few years later, Reb Mendele went to Eretz Yisrael. And he moved to Tveria. And that's where he lived till his passing in Tovkuf Memches, I think, and he's buried in Tveria in the cemetery there. He went to the Balatanya, but he told the Balatanya, you got to go back. Russia needs you. You got to go back. And he didn't let him come with him. He went with Rabbi Avram of Kalisk, who was another Talmud of the Maggid, and a group of Chassidim. So the Balatanya went back, yeah.
He actually stayed in Ukraine for a year. He made Chassidim. That was the only Lubavitch Chassidim in Mogilov for this.
Mogilov, yeah. Tovkuf Lamed Ches, I think, yeah. Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches. And then he came back, yeah. Reb Mendele was there, and the truth is, till the Petira of Reb Mendele, the Alter Rebbe was not mamish. Although he taught and he had a lot of Talmidim, but he didn't assume officially like the position of a Rebbe. After the Petira of Reb Mendel, Tovkuf Mamches, which was many years later, he felt more. I guess he felt it was more appropriate. So they say it was one night Rosh Hashanah, and Reb Mendele came home. And he was already sitting by the tish, and they started the Suda. They wanted to start the Suda, make Kiddush. And he looked up, and he sees the Balatanya, who came to him in Rosh Hashanah, wasn't there. So he looks around, and he says, if somebody saw the Balatanya, the Alter Rebbe, he wasn't called in the Balatanya. They called him the Liozhne Maggid, the Rav, or Zalman, Reb Zalman, the Maggid used to call him, whatever the name was. But he asked where he was. The Litvak, yeah. The Litvak they called him, yeah. So he asks. So they said he's still in Shul. So Reb Mendele, and they waited and he wasn't coming. So Reb Mendele Haradoker decided to go himself to call him. I think first he sent somebody and said, David noch, he's still there. So he went himself. He went into Shul, and the Rebbe was davening. He was davening himself the night of Rosh Hashanah Ma'ariv. So the Mendele came back. They said, "Was tut er?" So he could have said, "Davent." He said, "Bazalosh." Freit sich mit dem Ebersten, und der Eberste freit sich mit ihm. That's what he's doing. He's dancing with God, and God is dancing with him. He's rejoicing with Hashem, and Hashem is rejoicing with him. That's how the Mendele Haradoker described the Ma'ariv of Rosh Hashanah. Freit sich mit dem Ebersten, und der Eberste freit sich mit ihm. So even on a very simple level, the beginning of that's the genesis of Avodas Hashem. Person wakes up in the morning, there's a calling, there's a relationship, there's an opportunity. I want you, you want me, just like in any good relationship, in a couple's life, friends' lives. So the I is involved in a relationship. Then there is, when Kula Kamei, what's Kamei? He puts in the word Mamish, and he puts in the words Ein Davar Nifrit. Took a Maamer Azoya, puts in the word Mamish, because it's always Kamei, you're always in his presence. But there's Kamei Mamish, meaning without concealment. One can experience on his level, Ein Oid Mulvadoy, and then Ein Davar Nifrit. Then there's nothing separate. Kaloi Choshev. There's no significance to anything outside of absolute oneness and infinity. So Avodas Hashem is now organic. It's essential. It's intrinsic because there's complete oneness. B'meila, what happens? So the seven midos become conduits for God's infinity. So automatically, if it's lefanecha, there's no midas rayis left. So the translation of oneness, how he translates it immediately, is not, he's up to one. You see it immediately in a person's midos. In a person's midos, you see where they are. A person's emotions, a person's interactions, a person's experiences, you see where they are in their relationship. Vayikach in Hashem means that the person is transformed in terms of their relationship, in terms of their midos, their emotions, their experiences. Automatically, v'charis me'abris. Ve'ein davar nifrit. B'meila v'hainu losses lazarei. That's why he says, these seven nations are going to be given over to the children. What does it mean? What does it mean to the children? Shenesunim, they're given over, umisbatlim, bekoyach habitul ha'amiti. And he puts in habitul ha'amiti. Because they become, the midos shirayas become nullified in the power of the true bittul. What's the true bittul? True bittul means that there's nothing separate. Kaidei levavai hanem and avram, ein tainus, usvara klal liyas nifrid helasheratzelis garev. Kimeyoylam lahayadav nifrid. In this state of consciousness, what we call the loyal heart of Avram, it's not, there's a taina, there's a svara. A taina means there's a complaint, meaning I have to justify it. I have a taina, somebody says I have a taina. Or a svara, there's a logic to be separate. And then you say, but I don't want to be separate. I have your money, you lent me $100,000. There's a svara to keep it. It's nice to have in the bank $100,000. Can you do the Maisa about the Rav? The rabbi of the big shul, every Friday would go to the bank and take out a loan for $50 million, and he would return it Monday morning, 10 o'clock a.m. Every week. He did this for years. One day the manager calls him over and says, I don't understand. Obviously, between Shabbos and Sunday, you're not doing anything with $50 million. What's the point of this loan? He says, listen, when I get up in front of my balabatim to speak on Shabbos, to give a sermon, everything is different when I know and they know that I have $50 million in the bank. It's just different. I can say what I want. I don't need anybody. I don't care. So there's a svara, you gave me a loan. There's a svara and a taina to say, maybe we could make some, moida b'miktzas kai for hakal. And then I argue and I say, no, that's unjust. It's immoral. This is how people live. You live with tainus and svaras. There are struggles. There's battles. There's options. And you have to choose. There's pros and there's cons and everything. But then you have to tell yourself, what type of life do you want? You want to be a fugitive? You want to be a criminal? You want to be lying to yourself? You can do that. That's a life. People do it. Is it a life? It's a life if you want to live a very small, narrow life, lying to people, deceiving people, not returning calls. I mean, there are people who live that life. They're like always on the run. Emotionally, they're always on the run. They can't look at anybody. They're in a fight with half the world. I mean, you're familiar with what I'm talking about. It's a way of living. I mean, it's not a quality life. It's a pretty impoverished life. It's a very poor life. But these are choices. Because, I have that sum of money. There is a voice in me that says, maybe we can arrange, maybe you can arrange something. And then I have to tell myself, no. And this is constantly true when I'm about to gossip. I'm about to say I'm about to become part of a juicy conversation, present company excluded. Yeah, and there's a svara. That's what he calls taino svara. And then I tell myself, I don't want this for me. The same is true. You come home, you can get into a fight with your spouse, you can get into an argument, you have issues, everyone has issues, and you could let them harbor and you let them sit and they go on for days. There's a way of living like that. I have to be right. and this person is wrong, and then they say, I don't want that life. It's miserable. But I have to tell myself, because there's a voice in me that says, be miserable and be right. There's that voice. And then there's the voice that says, no, say I'm sorry and be rich. Be rich. And the same is true in almost everything in life. Life is about choices. Why is life about choices? Because there's a lot going on and I have to choose within myself between different voices. Levavai, my heart is not made of one piece. The heart is gemacht von asach sticker. It's not nemon lefanecha einoid mulvade. I can't live always in that consciousness, if ever. So I'm always making choices. Person comes home, their child wants to spend time with them. You're exhausted. All you want to do is hit the sack. Second best, sit on the couch with your phone. Okay? The option of sitting on the floor playing or giving attention or listening to stories or doing homework, it's really not something you want. So there's an instinct. There's an instinct that wants to blow up. There's an instinct that just wants to run away. There's an instinct that just wants to go into your own news sites or surf the webs or the yeshiva.net or whatever it is, and from the better options. But not if you got to be with your child. And then you make a choice and you say, what type of father do I want to be? What type of mother do I want to be? And it doesn't mean when I make a choice that the other choices were not real. They were very real, and that's what gives my choice value. And making a choice doesn't mean that you don't have other voices inside of you that tell you, I'm not interested. I'm not interested, but I choose to be interested, even though I'm not interested. And again, we go back to the famous Yerushalmi that we often quote in Brachas, one of the most important steps in life, Im ein das, havdalah minayin. We say Atachain Antanu and Atachain and Ladam Das because Havdalah always comes from Das. Perception allows for choices. When there's no perception, I can't make choices. I'm in a web. I'm caught up in my spider's web. I'm stuck. When there's Das, I could make choices. But choices come from the fact that I can see the value here, the benefit of here. And that's what he's saying. There's a taina on asvara liyah snifrit. There's a way of choosing. I don't want a relationship. I don't need this whole relationship. I'm not interested. That's a taina. Loitza liyah snifrit. I want to be selfish. I want to be separate. Elisheroitza liskarif. But then I say no. I want to be close. I want to be close. I don't want to treat my eye this way. I want to be close. I realize what that means for me, what that means for my life. Then there's Avram Avinu's stage. He says there's no taina and svara. Why kimei olam lo hayad nifrit? There was never anything separate. There was no separateness. That's a second state. That's a completely different state of consciousness. There was no period. If there's no period, there's no I that's separate, and there's no options. It's a chatchila oneness. Over here, there's taka no fragmentation. This is what he calls habitul ha'amiti. Why? Because kula kamei, in his presence, mamish, kaloi mamish chashiva. What said kaloi mamish chashiva? Not that nothing has chashivas, meaning you're the ultimate shmata in the world. It means ve'ein davar nifrit. You're never separate. There's never a partition between you and infinity. So kula kamei kaloi chashiv, when you hear those words, kula kamei kaloi chashiv, everything in his presence has no chashivas. What does it mean? In his presence, nothing is separate. Nothing has separate chashivas. There's never a chatzitza. There's never, like in mikveh we say chatzitza, there's never a partition between you and God. So a person will say, what do you mean? But I have all these sins and I have all these issues and I have all these problems. In kamei, in his presence, nothing could constitute a real partition because einoid mulvade, there's absolute oneness. So there's nothing in your life and in your past that could constitute a separation between you and Hashem. That's what it means. I don't know if you want to go there with your boss.
How can you understand that?
Unless you're the boss. Maybe you want your employees to go there with you.
How can you
He wants to explain it with the water in the Pacific, no?
It's the vision of the boss.
I don't know, we're going to get the union upset. Workers' rights. I don't know, was felt there is that a boss and an employee have to be like this?
understand how when you bit we have a better relationship of oneness, not a bit of
And the spouse is better. He has or somebody else.
If the employee and the boss reach that place, I mean, they're like maybe best friends and this. I'll tell you a story that's it's not an employee and a boss, but I heard it from a Yid. His name is Rabbi Posner. He lived in Borough Park for many years. He lived in California, lived in Borough Park. I think now he lives in Crown Heights. He's an elderly Yid. So I once heard this from him. I was walking Shabbos to Shul, coming from Shul, and I met him. I told him to tell me a Maisa. So I told him a Maisa, and he told this to me. When he was a Bacher, he was around 13 years old, around 13. The Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, came to America a few years earlier. He ran away from Nazi-occupied Warsaw. And everybody knows that America then was not America today. There were barely 3 or 4 yeshivas, and B'chal Yiddishkeit was very, very weak here, extremely weak. My mother told me that when she was dating my father, he had a beard, and people would stop in the street and point. There was a person... Huh?
The Rebbe told my father, my father said he's not in Gaza. He said if you walk out on the 770 and he's in the Parkway, cars would stop and bring cameras inside the
Yeah, it was like Baruch Mashana Abrius. It's hard for people to understand today. It was like Mashana Abrius, yeah. The first things that Rebbe, when he came to the shore, when he came to America, he said the famous expression, America is nicht anders. America is not different. It could be a place of Torah and Yerushalayim. But it was a completely new concept. So one of the first things he started to do was build Jewish day schools all over the United States. Some of them still exist today. He built dozens and dozens of day schools, which was unheard of. All Jewish kids went to public school. Even the most from families. There were mamish 3 or 4 yeshivas of higher learning. In terms of elementary schools, there was almost nothing. Mamish. Then they started to build. So he started to build day schools. And that's why most Jews assimilated. In America, in the earlier years, 1 million Jews were lost to assimilation, even though many of the parents were religious. So he built, one day, the Rebbe decided that we have to build a school in Chicago. So he called in this Posner boy and his brother. His brother's already off an oilam. His name was Zalman Posner. He was a rabbi in Memphis, Tennessee. He called them in. And Label told this to me, Rabbi Label Posner. He said, I want to open a yeshiva in Chicago. And it was all tzutzi and kinder, bringing children. And I appointed you to send it to be the first students, the first Talmidim. And then he said, Ich hab euch nicht gefragt, früher. I didn't ask you first. Weil ich rechne euch wie einer von meinen Evorim. Und bei einem Ever darf man nicht fragen. I consider you as one of my limbs. One of the limbs of my body. And by the limbs, you don't have to ask. Because it's one. The mashal I gave, you remember? Yes, my hand goes up. It's not like my brain sits down for a board meeting with the hand and says, let's discuss it. And says, who do you think you are? Okay, I'll give you a bonus at the end of the year. And then says, okay, if you'll be a nice boss, it's one. It's one. And then he told them more things. They went to Chicago. So he started to cry when he told me the story. So I asked him, I guess it was a brute and coarse question, but I wanted to understand. So it was a brute and coarse question because it came from the first pchina. I said, you weren't upset? I mean, somebody calls you in and said, I decided that you're moving tomorrow to Melbourne because I have to open a yeshiva. Well, huh? A 13-year-old. You could move to Melbourne if you want. I mean, you consult me. So he looked at me, he started to cry. He says, upset? It was my happiest moment in life. It was my happiest moment in life. He said, I didn't have to hear more than that. He said, to live life just to hear those words. He said, I felt the privilege I felt you can't imagine. Now, what's the Havana in this? What does this mean? What does this mean? If a person feels that a Rebbe is just in it for power, you're not going to feel this way. You're going to call it abuse. Which, as you know, a lot of Rebbes, if they'll call in a chaz, they say, I want you to move to Morocco for 6 months. What are they going to say? You could move. Huh? Yeah, you jump first. Excuse me. You're in Florida for the next 6 months, and I'm going to go to Morocco. Which is why they wouldn't do it. They have seichel. You don't understand? I'm sitting on a throne. I'm not talking about anybody individually. I know right away, it's not a class of politics here. It's the concept. Excuse me? Maybe, yeah, if you have a company and you're going to pay me an extra 50 grand, I'll go to Morocco for 6 months, fine. You got to make it worth it for me. In other words, the reason my hand listens to the brain is, there's a reason for it. Because the brain 24 hours is taking care of my hand. Because 24 hours the brain feels responsible for every limb and organ in the body. There's not a pinky that the brain says, oh, it's not mine. You're not belong to me. I don't take care of you. The whole mitzias of the brain is what? Mesiras nefesh for the body. The brain does anything to protect the body. Well, when you have such a Rebbe, he says, I consider you like one of my Evarim. So I didn't have to hear more than that in life. Now, what was he really saying? What he was really saying was that the greatest compliment he can get from the Rebbe was that he didn't have to consult me. If the Rebbe said, I need to consult you, then he would feel insulted. Why? I'm separate. A separate person you have to consult. I can't send you to Chicago. Fair nicht to send you to Chicago. You're an Eved. You're my slave. Masters and slaves did that. But slavery was abolished. Not everybody knows that. But slavery was abolished by Abe Lincoln. If that's the Geder, that's where the Gemara says, Avde ben Gittin, Avde behefkere nichalei. An Eved wants hefkeris. He has no choice. He's a slave. That's what a slave is. He has no choice. But if he says, if the Rebbe would say, I want to consult you, think about it. Come back to me in a week. For him, that would have been, a letdown. We're separate. The fact that the Rebbe could tell me, you're my Aver, for him there was nothing greater than that. That he mamish one with his Rebbe, who he saw as mamish an Eved Hashem, completely bottled to Hashem to the Ein Sof. He didn't need more in life. Where do you need more in life than that? But there has that relationship you can't force. I can't force. If it's forced, then it's not that. Then it's stopped. Then you're an abused victim. Then you have the battered woman syndrome. You know what battered is? You're a battered victim. This is not because I came out, I asked him, I said, you felt abused? I knew he didn't. I just wanted to understand his hergish. He looked at me and said, abused? The happiest moment of my life. So somebody can hear it and say, yeah, he drank the Kool-Aid. But we're not talking about obliteration of personality. When somebody is in a real cult and, please, hang me. You become Nebuch, a dysfunctional person. You don't think for yourself. We're not talking about that. That you could see right away a person doesn't think, they don't feel, because they become completely dependent. That's not what Kula Kameka Lechashav means. Fakert! Your midas become greater, deeper, more powerful, not less. They're not nifred. That's the difference. The cult is trying to obliterate you. I don't want you. I just need you as an Eved. I need you as a robot, as a slave. The less personality, the better. The less thoughts, the better. The less emotions, the better. Then I can manipulate you. Here we're talking about Ein Sof never manipulates, because it's oneness, it's truth. I don't have to manipulate. You're not a threat. Fakert. You're an asset. You're never a threat. Rebbe Zriel, אתה מבין? מה זה חסד?
Isn't God more similar to a board than to a Rebbe?
Depends what type of Rebbe. Question was a Rebbe does gesehen. But he can only feel like that about his Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, because of who that person was. Avada, it's all Hashem. The definition of a real Rebbe is that he's completely bottled to the Ein Sof. That's why he's the brain. The nekuda of the moyach is that it thinks about everything of the body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now think of Knesset Yisrael as a body. If you have a moyach that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is continuously thinking about every single limb, including the last pinky, the last toenail, that's his whole metzius. Then it's a schus to be part of that. It's not I'm part of you and I become part of your party, your maflega, your cult, your chotzer, your thing. Because your whole metzius is achdus with Hashem. This typhus was a There's a vort, a very chassidische vort, and a good one too, a sharp vort. It says in Pirkei Avos, Yehi chvoid chavercha chavav alecha kishalach. The covet of your friend should be as valuable as yours. U'moira rabach k'moira shamayim. Your fear of your Rebbe should be like your fear of heaven. You've heard this line from Pirkei Avos. So how does everybody touch it? You got to be scared of your Rebbe like you're scared of God. Does this work good for a Rebbe? It's excellent. You got to be scared of me like you're scared of it's a Pirkei Avos. And as they'll always say, don't argue with me, argue with Pirkei Avos, which means you're not Pekaitis. It says clearly you should be scared of your Rebbe like you're scared of God. It says that's true. But like always, you miss the pnimius of the vart. So there's a vart, I think it comes, I saw it from the Sar Shalom of Bells, the first Bells Zerova, maybe the Naftali Rapshitz, one of the great Hasidic masters, Ahela Kayid. So he said it's actually not a commandment, it's a prediction. It's a commandment, but the commandment is always a prediction, like every commandment. Vahafta, the Alter Rebbe says, is Lashon Tzivui and Lashon Haftacha. Whatever is a mitzvah is also a prediction. Because if it's a mitzvah, it means that's where you belong. You understand? Every mitzvah is also a prediction. A mitzvah is not a commandment. It's a commandment, but it's a prediction. This is where you belong. It's like the brain telling the finger, stay away from fire. If you're a healthy finger, that's where you belong. It's not, I'm not commanding you. In the real achdus, you don't need mitzvah. Because mitzvah means you're separate. A healthy pinky, the brain says, don't touch fire, it doesn't touch fire. If chas v'shalom it's separate, then you have to take it away. You take it away. So he says like this. Is the pshat prediction. The fear of your Rebbe, K'moira Shamayim, is always going to be commensurate with his fear of God. Moira Rabach, the fear of your Rebbe will always be dependent on Moira Shamayim, on his Yirah Shamayim. It'll always be. In other words, your Yirah of him is just a mirror of his Yirah from Hashem. It's just a mirror. It's not like, fear me like you fear God. No. You fear God, and that's mirrored in my awe of you. It's just a mirror. You want I should have Yirah for my Rebbe? No problem. It's up to the Rebbe. It's not up to me. You get it? Now that's the pnimius of the Mishnah. That's why Moira Rabach K'moira Shamayim. But when the Rebbe starts using this as a tool for people to be scared of him, then you're stupid if you're scared of him. Then you're an idiot. Forgive me. Because you're selling your Yirah to for egotism. You should have Yirah Shamayim. Right? The Baal Shem Tov's father said, don't be afraid of anybody but Hashem. Well, says Moira Rabach K'moira Shamayim. If the Moira Rabach is separate from Yirah Shamayim, then you got the wrong Rebbe. Or maybe he's a good guy, but it's not that Indian. He's a fine person, no problem. He could be a CEO. There's nothing wrong with being a CEO. But that doesn't have to do with Moira Rabach K'moira Shamayim. Again, I'm not talking about any individuals. We're talking a concept. If it's shaykh to you, it's shaykh to you. If it's not shaykh to you, it's not shaykh to you. It's just chas v'shalom not to be mavatal anybody. Although some of you are smiling very nicely. For whatever reason. For some reason, I don't think it's because of the intellectual depth. That's pshat. So that's a mashal. You asked about a boss and a master. Das der herich. That's pshat. It says, Kiyam Avram Avinu kol ha'Torah kula shloi nitna. Avram Avinu did all the mitzvahs before they were given. How? If they weren't given, how did he do it? The answer is the body feels the brain. When there's no nifrid, when there's no period, if this is what Hashem wants, Avram felt it because there's organic connection. There's no separateness. A mitzvah is a commandment when you're separate. When you're not separate, you don't need the commandment because you're an extension. Ein davar nifrid klal. That's why it says by the Akedah, fascinating thing. I think Reb Mendel Haradaka says this in Priya Aretz. I'm almost sure he, or maybe the Morinayim, one of the Talmidim of the Maggid says, it says by the Akedah, they came to the altar, he tied Yitzchak by the altar on top of the wood, Vayishlach Avraham es yadoi vayikach es amacheles lishchetas b'nai. Avram sent out his hand and he took the sword to slaughter his son. Well, obviously, you take a sword by sending forth your hand. It could have said vayikach Avram es amacheles. We all know how you take a sword with your hand. You don't take it with your nose. You take it with your hand. An elephant takes it with a trunk, lahavdil. A person takes things with their hands. Vayikach Avram es hama'acheles. Vayishlach Avram es yadoi. Vayikach es hama'acheles. And if it wouldn't say, he took the sword. How? With his hand? No, he sent forth his hand. No, what's pshat? Moededik. Usually, Avram Avinu's hand, just like my hand, I don't have to send forth my hand. I didn't think right now before I spoke that in order to bring out the point, I should go like this. So I told my hand, go like this. The hand is in sync with the brain. It's almost in sync. The brain will, and there's a nerve signal, and almost berega kamemra, a millisecond, the hand goes like this. There's no special commandment to the hand, because the hand and the brain are one. Avram Avinu, because of his oneness with God, so there didn't have to be a separate command. It was like instinctive, it was automatic. Besides one thing. Taking the sword. Because taking the sword he thought was God's will. But it really wasn't Hashem's will. Hashem's will was, Al tishlach yad chalanar. So it wasn't going. His hand wasn't moving because it's not what God wanted. Vayishlach Avram es yadoi. He had to send forth his hand. Gay! He had to send forth his hand. It wasn't natural. It wasn't organic. He had to send forth his hand because it wasn't really God's will. So there was no holistic oneness and that organic innate connection. So you had to do it especially. That's the Oimek. We'll see a little later. The Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos that when the Jews were by Sinai, they stood under a mountain. And Hashem said, if you take the Torah, good. If not, you're done. Kafa aleim har kegigis. He put a mountain over their heads like a vat, like an overturned vat. A gigis is an overturned barrel. It's a mountain over their head, over 4 million Jews. You want? Good. If not, this is a nice cemetery for you. Kafale marke gigis. Amar Rava, Shabbos daf peches. Amar Rava, mikan moidor rabbe loy raisa. This means the whole Torah was forced. Hadar kiblu b'me'achashverish. Purim, they finally accepted it. That's why it says in the Megillah, Kimu v'kiblu ha'yehudim. V'kibel ha'yehudim es asher heichelu lasos. The Jews affirmed and accepted. They accepted what they began. Kimu v'kiblu. What's pshat in the Megillah it says? It says, Kimu masha kiblu kvar. What they once accepted, they finally affirmed. First time they accepted it through coercion, and now they finally were Chaim and they said, yes, we're in. How much time was from Matan Torah till Purim? Purim happened after Bayis Rishon. Bayis Rishon was built 440 years after they came into Eretz Yisrael. 480 years after Matan Torah. Bayis Rishon stood for 410 years. So from Matan Torah till the building of the Beis HaMikdash was 480 years. 480 plus 410 is how much? 890. And then there was 70 years of Golus Bavel is what? 960. Almost a full millennium after Matan Torah passed till Purim. Almost a full 1,000 years. You got the cheshbon? Merveinike, give or take. For 1,000 years, Judaism was a fraud, a fake, a phony. I mean, what? This is it? 1,000 years. The whole Yiddish Jewish people are 3,000 years old. I mean, not such a small number. So a third of that, nobody was interested. It was all forced. Very nice. It's hard to understand. So Chassidus teaches, the Balatanya teaches a moire dike wort, but very, very edel, very subtle. On Purim, the Jews appreciated that the Kafa Aleim Har Kegigas of Matan Torah was the greatest compliment. Like when the Rebbe told him, I'm not asking you because you're mine. That's the greatest compliment. You're mine. This is who you are. This is how I see you. By Purim, the Jews finally understood that the Kaf Aleim of Matan Torah was the greatest moment of their life. On Purim, they understood retroactively how to look at Matan Torah. Okay. You want to know why Purim?
I want to know why it was worth 1,000 years of suffering.
Not suffering.
They were living with Pirud. They were living in this first state of... We have the ultimate goal of having this bittul. And we talk about it like it's, okay, you have step one, and then you get step two. But really,
I know, step two is wrong, you're right.
It's step one.
It's not really step two.
And then you have a step two.
It's
if you're
step
a lucky
all.
guy, once in a lifetime, you're going to have this step two for
But I'll tell you something. Step two enlightens step one.
So
that's the part. That's important.
Here, part, but what
step two enlightens. It's a different hergish than step one. The understanding of step two, at least on some level, gives a whole new chiyus to step one.
Why did it take 1,000 years for step two to take place?
The same thing with us learning, so it takes 50, 60 years to understand the process. 1,000 years.
So we play approach.
We're talking about the consciousness of Klal Yisrael. That on Purim,
We saw it in the Torah, no?
that too, yeah.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.